Did you know that Jesus likes building projects? We're talking today about Restore and Renew, which is our building project to renovate as I said, the hall, the office, and this building as well. But did you know that Jesus likes building projects? He said, "I will build my church." But of course, as most of you know, he wasn't talking about buildings like this or the hall. He was talking about the church as the people, us. And so, yes, Jesus is into building projects, but the slightly scary thing is that actually we are his building project. As that reading said, we, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. We are his building project. And did you know that God likes restore and renew? We chose to call it Restore and Renew because we want to restore our buildings to their former glory and renew them for the coming generations. But the words restore and renew are very biblical words. God talks about wanting to restore things and people, including broken people like me and you. He wants to restore us. And Jesus talks about wanting to renew all things, all creation. So God is into restore and renew. And in fact, there's a couple of verses in the Bible which mention both restore and renew together. One of them is from Isaiah. It's a prophecy of what God's people will do in the days of the Messiah. It says this: "They will restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations." So that's got to focus on buildings, hasn't it? Now, I know our buildings aren't in great shape, but it's a bit far-fetched to say that they're devastated. But it's wonderful to think that God is interested in buildings as part of it, as part of the rejuvenation of the people of God, and showing that he is with them and blessing them. Another of the verses which mentions restore and renew together is from Lamentations. And it's a prayer. It says, "Restore us to yourself, Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old." And so that's a prayer for spiritual awakening, a prayer to be restored and renewed. And so here's my question this morning. If we are God's building project, how does God want to restore and renew us as individuals, as a congregation? What's the building project he's working on with us? You know, we are the bricks and mortar. What are his grand designs for us? Well, let me take us back to our church vision, which flows out of the biblical commands to love. These are the central commands in the Bible. Jesus said the first and greatest command is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Now, Jesus doesn't say that because God is a bit needy, as if he needs our love. No, he's saying that because that's an appropriate response to God's love for us. The Apostle John said, "God is love. We love because he first loved us." So God has demonstrated his incredible love for us. He sticks with us even when we make silly decisions. He adopts us into his family. He forgives us when we mess up and sort of knowingly reject his plans and his purposes for our lives. He surrounds us with his compassion when we're hurting. There's so many different aspects to his love for us, demonstrated, of course, most powerfully in the cross as Jesus died for us to forgive us. It's a love which isn't just theoretical. It's a love which can be experienced as well. And so because God's love for us is so overwhelmingly huge, our appropriate response is to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Now, which of us does that? I think it's fair to say that even the most sort of passionately committed disciples of Jesus Christ here, we don't love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, do we? And so the first part of our church vision says that we want to go deeper with God because there is always more of God's love to experience. And we want to go deeper with God because there's always more of our love and our lives that we can offer to him as our response. And we want to go deeper also because the deeper the roots to our faith and trust in God, the easier it will be to withstand the storms of life. We all face those, don't we? We don't know when they're going to come, but we all face them. In the summer, our family went up to the Lake District. And by the waters of Buttermere and some of the other lakes, there are some trees where you can really see the roots exposed above the waterline and so on. And I was struck by how many roots there are to each tree. You know, it's not just one big root, it's lots and lots and lots of roots on each tree. Of course, normally they're hidden, we don't see them, but in this sort of place, we could see them. And the deeper the roots to our faith, of course, most of the roots are still underground, even though, we could see little bits of them, but the deeper the roots to our faith, the easier it will be to withstand those storms of life when they come. And the more roots we have to our faith, the more nourishment we're going to get through those times of drought when it feels as though God is absent from our lives. So how does God want to restore and renew us? Well, surely part of the answer is that he wants to increase our love for him. He wants us to go deeper with him. There is always more of his love and grace and mercy for us to experience. That reading said, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. So, think of a newborn baby, all sort of wrinkly and cuddly and lovely and wonderful and so on, completely dependent on the adults around it to survive. And such a distinctive cry, craving milk, desperate for milk. And the Apostle Paul is saying that we should be just like that, desperate for spiritual milk that will help us grow in our love for God, grow in our spiritual maturity. We've tasted, he says, that the Lord is good. Now we need to keep on lapping up this spiritual milk to help us keep growing. Or think of that famous verse from the Psalms, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. Now, I'm not sure I've ever seen a deer panting like that, but I've certainly seen our dog panting like that. You know what dogs are like, don't you? They're desperate for water when they're hot. Are our souls longing for spiritual refreshment as a dog or a deer pants for water? How desperate are we to go deeper with God? I mean, when a tree stops growing its roots, it's going to begin being in danger, isn't it? Or if a baby doesn't sort of cry out for food every few hours, something will be wrong. If a dog doesn't touch water, we'd be worried. And yet I fear that some of us are maybe a bit complacent about our relationship with God. We think, well, we know that Jesus loves us, and we've read the Bible, and we do a bit of praying. We come along to church. But friends, our souls should be panting, desperate to know God deeper than we do already. We've tasted that the Lord is good. We should want more of him. And so I wonder, is God wanting to restore and renew our love for him? How do we go deeper with God? Well, maybe, here's just some different options going on the quiet day with Trish in a couple of weeks' time. Maybe to begin reading the Bible by yourself, rather than just listening to it in church, actually read it by yourself, just a few minutes each day. Maybe you need to experiment with different ways of praying. You pray in a certain way or for certain things, but you need to expand and diversify that repertoire. Maybe you need to open up the murkier places of your hearts to some of the sort of mixed motives and fears and brokenness. You need to open some of that up to Father God, asking him to bring you healing, to restore you and renew you. I was struck in the Lake District, as I said, that those trees didn't just have one big chunky root, they had lots of different roots. And I was reflecting on that. I was thinking, well, I'm the sort of person who finds it easy to have a big chunky root in terms of my relationship with God, in terms of the Bible. I love reading the Bible. I find it so nourishing. But actually one root isn't going to help me when the storms really come. I need lots of roots. I need to be developing these other aspects of my spiritual life as well. Some of us find prayer really easy. Some of us find worship really easy. But we need to be making sure we've got lots of roots to our faith. That's what will help make us strong when the storms of life come. And so maybe we need to develop some of those other roots. The practices of confession, or worship, or silence, or whatever it is. So that's the first part of our church vision. But Jesus also said, love one another as I have loved you. And in this letter, the Apostle Peter has already said, love one another deeply from the heart. So, he's not just talking about a nodding acquaintance with each other across the room. He's talking about something deep. Jesus himself had demonstrated the sort of love that he was talking about, because he just washed his disciples' stinky feet, hadn't he, when he told us to love one another as he has loved us. So he's talking about a deep, sacrificial love, servant love. And so church isn't just a collection of individual believers who happen to gather in the same building on a Sunday morning. Church is supposed to be a diverse group of people who love and serve one another, a deep community characterized by these interdependent relationships, where I need you as much as you need me. We need each other. Peter had said in that reading, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So, picture the scrapyard. We're not to be individual bricks just dotted around the scrapyard. No, we're to be built together in such a way that, I'm resting, I'm leaning on other bricks, and other bricks are leaning on me, and we're all dependent on each other to be this brick wall together. We are not many, we are one. And that as we are formed in this way, we become this spiritual house, he says, a temple where we meet with God and serve him together. And then a few verses later, Peter says, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. And that's true for us as well. Once we weren't a people, but now we are a people. We are God's people at St. James by the Park. We're one community. Bricks don't belong by themselves. They belong with other bricks. And if you're here this morning and let's say 5 other people don't know you by name and don't know some of your current situation, then maybe that's a sign that you're not as well connected in as you need to be to community. And we'd love to help you become more connected into community. How many people here would spot if you weren't here? Or how many people would you know well enough to be able to call if you were going through a difficult time? How many would you trust enough to divulge something quite personal to? It's not just enough to say, oh, well, I know Dan the vicar. I can't pastor 300 people in the congregation. I'm not supposed to. We need each other. Bricks belong together. Or think back to those tree roots in the Lake District again. I was struck by how the roots of the different trees are intertwined with each other. A group of trees together is far stronger than a single tree by itself. And the intertwining of the roots helps give it solidity when the storms of life come. Are you a single tree, or are you planted together? As I say, we'd love to help you become more integrated. Maybe join one of the small midweek groups or join a team to serve. They're both great ways to get to know other people. But in church life, it's very easy to, love the people who are most like us, isn't it? It's harder to love those who are different to us. And yet we live in an increasingly diverse and divided society. And so there are people here with different values, different political allegiances, different cultural backgrounds, different academic or other sorts of backgrounds. And Jesus doesn't just call us to love the people who are most like us, he calls us to love the people who are most different to us as well. Jesus said, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? The reviled people. And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? In other words, Christian love, the sort of love that Jesus models, is love that has to cross boundaries, even when that's uncomfortable. That's when people will most clearly see our love for Jesus and how Jesus transforms our hearts. That's when people will most clearly see that we love one another despite our differences. All people will see that we are his people then. And so if you've been here for a while, and yet the people that you know are mostly people who are like you, well, there's a danger then that church could become more like a social club rather than the holy temple, the royal priesthood that God is wanting to build us. Our vision says that we're to grow closer to each other. And so I wonder, is God wanting to restore and renew our love for one another so that it goes deeper than it does at the moment? Our commitment to growing closer, to become more the church community that God wants us to be. Maybe that's how God is wanting to restore and renew us. So, love God, love each other. The third part of our vision stems from Jesus' command to love our neighbour as ourselves. How do we love our neighbour? Well, by demonstrating the love of Jesus through our actions and speaking about the love of Jesus through our words. That reading said, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, so that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." So we declare God's praises to each other, yes, but we also declare God's praises to an unbelieving world, saying how God has, taken us from darkness to light. We share that with our family and friends, our colleagues, our neighbours. And in our church vision, we express this as we want to reach further with the love of God. And why do we do that? Well, Paul wrote, the love of Christ compels us. Someone once explained this to me with the illustration of tiddlywinks. Do you remember tiddlywinks? You've got a small disc in your hand, and you've got a small disc on the table, and you press down with the disc in your hand on the disc on the table, and it jumps up into the air and hopefully lands in a pot somewhere over there. And he said, that's compelling. The love of Christ is compelling us. It's so strong, fills our hearts so much that it compels us to share that love of God with other people. I wonder if God is wanting to restore and renew our desire to share our faith, to reach further with the love of Jesus. Maybe we've become tired of sharing our faith, or disconsolate in sharing our faith because people just tend to ignore us. Or maybe we've seen it as something for other people to do, but actually it's not our responsibility. Or maybe we're happy to love our neighbour with our actions, but we're really reluctant to speak about our faith with our words. Is God wanting to restore and renew our commitment to reaching further with the love of God? I went to a seminar a couple of years ago at New Wine on revival. And it was led by someone who'd researched some of the great revivals in history, different places where thousands of people at a particular point in time have become Christians. And the culture, the society has been transformed. They're inspiring stories. And his conclusion was, revival comes where revival is really, really, really wanted. Where people pray and pray and pray and pray for revival, for people to become Christians, for society and culture to be transformed. And I was really struck by that, Because it made me think, well, how much do I really want revival? It's all right, it's easy to say, yes, I want revival, but how committed am I to that, to really praying persistently for people to become Christians? How committed am I to wanting revival? If we just keep doing the same old things, we'll get the same old results. Sometimes revival means that, or being prepared to pray for revival means that we have to be willing to change the way things are at the moment. Sometimes being willing to pray for revival means that we've got to have that courage to share our faith. Do I want revival here? Am I committed to praying persistently? I think I need God to restore my passion for reaching further with the love of Jesus. We've heard a lot recently, haven't we, about the quiet revival going on in the UK. People just pitching up at church for no apparent reason, but they're hungry to know God. Or people buying Bibles and looking at Bibles online because they're spiritually desperate to see if Jesus can offer something which society cannot offer. It's wonderful. These young people in particular coming to explore faith. And we've got copies of the Message translation of the Bible in the foyer there. Are we willing to give those out to people if they want a Bible? Are we willing to be welcoming in all sorts of new people to church, even if that means that church changes a bit? We've got people coming on the Alpha course. That's fantastic. Are we praying for those people that they would become Christians, that renewal and revival would come? We've got hundreds of young people who stop by the church doors every Monday after school to have a hot chocolate and a donut. Are we so concerned for our young people and their spiritual openness that we want to join that team and have conversations with those young people and get to know them so that we can share the love of Jesus with them? Lord, would you restore and renew our commitment to reaching further with the love of Jesus? So we are God's building projects. How is God wanting to restore and renew us? Not just our buildings, but us. Here's how we're going to respond to this sermon. I'm going to ask the welcome team to begin bringing round. We've got some response forms and we've got some pens. And so if you can begin doing that, and feel free to grab one or two others just to help with that, to speed it up. And on that response form are a variety of ways that people can respond. I've given a lot of challenges in this morning's sermon. I'm not expecting you to take all of those challenges on board. I'm going to give us time just to pray, because I think there may be just one, maybe two of those particular aspects of restore and renew that God might be wanting to do within us. So it may be that actually your contribution to Restore and Renew today is to give financially to the building project. But it may be that your commitment to being restored and renewed is to say, yes, I want to go deeper with God. Or yes, I want to grow closer to each other. Or yes, I want to reach further with the love of Jesus. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to have a look through those forms. Chris is going to come up and play some quiet music for us. And just to pray. Lord, what is it you're putting on my heart this morning? What is my individual response to this message about being restored and renewed? And just whilst those sheets continue to come round, let me share something that was in the prayer gathering before the service this morning. A particular word came, a particular picture, which may be relevant to one or more people here. And it was a picture of names written on paper, but then nailed to ourselves. And they're derogatory names that people have called us in the past, or that we've called ourselves in the past, or we've felt about ourselves even currently. And then the picture shows that Jesus has nailed those names to the cross, that those names are conquered, and that we are free of that shame. And so if that's something that applies particularly to you, write that on the form. That's your response today. Actually, that God is wanting to take those false names that have been said about you or that you believe about yourself. He's nailed it to the cross, and he wants you to know the freedom that comes from that. And after that picture, someone wrote this prayer. It said, I will change your name. You shall no longer be called wounded, outcast, lonely, or afraid. I will change your name. Your new name shall be confidence, joyfulness, overcoming, faithfulness, friend of God, one who seeks my face. So if that word is for you, then pray on that. And on the form, I've put some suggestions of things that what it might look like. And there's one in particular there about prayer triplets. That's, opportunities for 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 2, but normally 3 people in the congregation to pray together on a regular basis. And they're people that you trust, and we can pray more deeply and honestly. Angel was talking earlier, wasn't she, about praying honestly. There's a richness in praying honestly with a prayer triplet. And there's a few new prayer triplets forming at the moment. So now is a good time, if you want to join a prayer triplet, to tick that box and do that. So, Chris, play us some quiet music, and let's just take a few minutes to pray about how we're going to respond.